Okay, we're continuing with Rav David Eidenson, part 2 of this week's program, dealing with get laws and Pilegesh. So let me ask you a question, Rabbi Eidenson. Literally, as I said, there are thousands of gittin being given. I know that Rabbi J. David Balak famously said when they made the second get law in New York State, that it casts a serious shadow of every get that's given, not only if it's given through the court system, but even if the get is given by a yid, stam in New York State or in other locales where they have such similar laws, it casts a big suffix on the legitimacy of the get, because in the back of a person's mind, there's a mirsus, there's a fear, there's an element of potential coercion that he's afraid he might get yanked into court and he might lose in the division of assets or in terms of custody and visitation or other things, sometimes even putting a person in prison for contempt of court for not giving enough child support. There are maisim happening in Brooklyn. There have been many fathers who've been picked up and put into prison for these things. And there have been rabbanim who have gone to prisons and written gittin. They must sold some kind of a heta. But anyhow, this is what J. David Balak says. I understand Rev Eliashiv had similar concerns. And so I would like to ask you to comment on that in general. And then I'd like to ask you to comment. It's a ma'aseh b'chol yom, not b'chol yom, that they put out siruv lists like in newspapers, and they put out letters from Batei Din all over the country that this person's Mesiruv, he didn't come to Bezdin, he's not giving a get, and the Bezdin Paskid he should give a get, and he doesn't give a get, and they mefarsim it. So is this kind of a coercion? I mean, is this kind of coercion publicizing the person's names and being right of him and trying to make him come to heel, if you will? By the threat of a court or by public sanction or embarrassment? Are there any halachic sources that deal with this?
Okay, just that point, I'll start with the last point. There's a Chazon Ish. There's Chazon Ish says that if the best, remember, that the Shulchan Aruch and Kuf Nun Daled says a very few people that were allowed to force them to give a get. Very few. It does not include the vast majority of men with women. Even if there's all types of difficulties in marriages, but still, the heter to remarry is very rare. And even when the Shulchan Aruch says clearly at the very end of Kuf Nun Daled that there's two levels of a husband that does something which is against what Chazal say in the Shulchan, and not in the Shulchan Aruch, but in the Gemara itself. The Gemara itself has two levels. One level is when the Gemara says you have to do something to force him. That's one level. Then you can take a stick and beat him up to give the get. For instance, if somebody marries somebody, which is absolutely also from to marry, they tell them break it up or we'll break your head. So that's one level. I don't say break your head, but a stick can be used to force a person to give a get. Then they use it. So then the other level is he does something maybe it's also, but it's not considered such a terrible thing. Maybe it's for whatever reason it's not so terrible like the first thing, and then we don't allow him to be beaten or to be forced physically. But what we do allow is to say one thing to him: you are over such and such a sin, maybe a drabanan, whatever it is, and therefore it's allowed to call you a rosha. That's all. More than that, it's awesome. Besides that, the Gemara says there, and the Marik says that in those cases where the only thing you're allowed to do is call him a rosha, or even any time when there's the heter of the Rabbeinu Tam to a passive pressure, it's only mutter if he can run away somewhere to a city where nobody will bother him. But today, with telephones and with the internet, with all types of information about everybody where they are, that doesn't exist. Second of all, the Shach himself disagrees with the whole head of Rabbeinu Tam, and he brings a big person who says we never ever heard of anybody do anything like this, and therefore you should not do it. The Shach says we should not do these things. We should not make the passive thing of Rabbeinu Tam. Why? Yes, Moshe, and why is it that he's telling people to go to Ur to force a get? They scream with him, give a get, all types of misyonis. So So he said, because he read somewhere that Rabbeinu Tam was martyred. Rabbeinu Tam asked even for the person to tell the husband it would be a good idea to give a get. Ad kedei kach. But he allows a passive thing, not to mention the word get, just not to talk to the husband. Passive. He don't talk to him, have nothing to do with him. Then you didn't tell him anything. But if you tell him something about what's better, it's a better thing to give a get. That's awesome. That could be the Chazani says, if a bezdin tells a person who's not mechuyev to give a get, you should give a get, and he does it, the get is both of being Torah for two reasons. First of all, it's a get ba'onis, and it's not chal. Minat Torah, it's not chal. And second of all, if the husband would have known that it's a get ba'onis, he never would have given it, so it was a get ba'toyis. That's the Chazanish. And if Chaim used to say about the Chazanish, when he first heard about him, he said, there's a new light in Klaisel. He will be a God of Yisrael. And he became a Gavaldik God of Yisrael. So this is from the Chazanish. You can fight with the Chazanish.
I want to tell you a quick story that happened in the last couple of years. The subject of this story is a person who is considered an Eloi, an Adam Gadol, a Rosh Hashiva, a Chashiva, Rosh Hashiva, Magid Shia, and Mashpia, and he was as a poisik of international renown. And a very famous book company has written a exhaustive biography of this person who was nifter a few years ago. I had a shaykhus with this person, and he was a great person. I know Rav Shmuel Birnbaum used to hold from Gevaldik and everything. He was a great person. There's no question about it. There was a young man who was suffering tremendously from his wife. She was reading Roid of his neshama and putting tremendous pressure on him. And she sent a certain person to threaten him. So he went to this Adam Chashav, Adam Gadol, and he said, what shall I do? They say in the Gas that you have a shaykhus with this brigand, with this fabrecha, with this threatener to get gitten. So therefore, control him. He's threatening me physically, sending messages because my wife hired him. So this Rosh Hashiva answered him, I'll tell you what. I have a bezdin. You'll come to my bezdin. And we'll be misdayin on the get. And I give you guarantee he won't threaten you anymore. So the younger man, this Rosh Hashiva, this and that, he's a younger man and is probably in his late 20s at the time, maybe barely 30 or 31, 32. No, he hears this. He doesn't have any havamin, anything's wrong. So he says like this, who is going to support me? She has that brigand. You're going to be the sholas. She says, I have a Talmud, and the Talmud will be your representative. He pays the Talmud thousands of dollars. And they go to a din Torah, and it's stretching out. And at one point, this Rosh Hashiva hears what a paskudnia thing that this lady was putting out false zach and horror mishpacha on him, that he's a molester and this and that. And the Rosh Hashiva was mavar, it's a sheker and it's an outrage. And he screams at the lady and she cries, ahinaher. Soif kol maisa, this is going on for a long time, let's say 2 years. In the middle of all this, listen to this, in the middle, the brigand gets impatient because his lady who's paying him gets impatient. So he goes to the other side's dayan, the Talmud of Rosh Hashiva, and he says, you just tell your client that I'm losing patience and something might happen if he doesn't finish this off soon. So this Talmud of the Rosh Hashiva, this guy who he's paying to be his boira, carries the message of the threat from the brigand, from the fabrecha. He gives over the message. You know why? Because this guy used to get a lot of women cases, and he would give his overflow to this boira. So he doesn't want to turn him off, so he'll give the message to his client. You understand? This is the Batei Din today. Now, so this younger man was a bright fellow. So he says, you tell this person, the Fabrecha, the two can play the same game, and I know where his grandchildren live. That's the message he sends back. The next session, His own boy says, Agav, he sticks it in like in the middle of a conversation. Agav, which grandchildren? Where do they live? In other words, he's still flacking for the brigand, for the Gavar Da'olim. This is the Rosh Yeshiva's Talmud. He's a prominent rabbi in Flatbush today with a brand new building. Ladies flock to him to do business. And this is what he did in that case. It's not the end of the story yet. So one day the Rosh Yeshiva gets upset and he starts screaming at the younger man, that's it, enough, it's 2 years already. You're going to have to give a get. So he says, what about the money that she calls me Zekis and she owes me money and this and that? What about that I should have control over my daughter's chinuch and this and that? I'm taking a price for the chinuch. I'm taking a price for everything. And I'm going to hold back her patur. She's not going to get her patur. And you give a get today. By the way, he gave the get. He was browbeaten by the Rosh Yeshiva, the Shalish, to give the get. Adam Gadol screamed at him like way screamed at him. He gave the get. Did he get the money that was supposed to be put into a bank account? Did he get control over his daughter's chinuch? He didn't get anything. But she wasn't going to get the heta, the patur. She goes out and she gets engaged to a person from Bnei Brak, a Gorish from Bnei Brak, from the Heilige Bnei Brak. So then she has to go to this rabbi, this Adam Gadol, to get a patur. Because if not, he won't marry. Now, how does our Yehuda Levin know this? Do you know how I know this? Because in my living room, I sat with the husband and I picked up the phone and I called the chassan and I told him in Yiddish, there's a big shaila on your Rebbe's get. Big shaila. And you should know that you should make sure this thing is straightened out because before you marry, you should check it out. And I spoke to a Rosh Bezdin in Lakewood, also no tzaddik. He wasted weeks and weeks, and finally he gave a call. Like if he gave a call Friday and Sunday was the chasna, you understand? They got married. They got married, and this younger man went to Rav David Feinstein and said, "What should I do?" And Rav David said, "You did what you could, and you can't do anything more." Okay, we're not finished yet. How did this lady get the patur from this Adam Rosh Yeshiva who promised he's not going to give the baton until she fixes up all the things she has to fix up? It's going to be money deposited, but the shtaris with Sachen. So what did she do? She went and she hired the same Flatbush Rabbi Rov in a fancy new building in the 20s, who's a big Tayin and Boira, whatever he is. They asked this rabbi, how much money did she pay him for this? But this is what they did. This is the justice already by an Adam Gadol. The story, Rabbi Eidenstein, is not over. The story is not over. They recently put out a book about this Adam Gadol. And he is an Adam Gadol, except when he makes a mistake, ain't cholkin chil Hashem, ain't cholkin kavod l'rav, and it's a mitzvah to be mafars in this. So the Bezdin continues after the Rav was nifta, and they write in his biography, they write the following story. There was a guy, and the Heintiger Rosh Bezdin proudly tells it over to a very choshev scribe, a Ben Torah, who wrote this story, who wrote this book that sold thousands of copies. There was a guy, and this and that, and he didn't want to give his wife, and he didn't want that the wife should get a patur. And we, the Bezdin, wrote a cheshbon why she should get the patur. And the rabbi said, I'm giving him the patur, and I'm going to sign under it in such big letters that he should be able to read it from his house in Borough Park. He should be able to see it in my house in a different neighborhood, or like John Hancock, he should be able to read it. And they wrote this over in the book. And this father, who was deprived, I could say, Aedis from 5 years shaykhus with him, the garbage that he was put through. And he couldn't never get near to this Rosh Yeshiva again because they would have a bodyguard to prevent. So this father goes, he opens up the book and he sees this story and he knows 100% is talking about him. They start searing with how much this Rosh Yeshiva and this Adam Gadol cared about Agunis from this Maisa. Where I think Rav David Feinstein was asked and said, there's a big shaila on this get. You hear? So he goes and he calls up the publisher, the world-renowned publisher of the book, and he says, I'm in pain. It's cold like ice. How do you know it's you? We don't know. Nobody understands. Maybe it's somebody else. And every which way to be potter from taking it out of further editions. This is the situation, Rabbi Eidenson, we're in with what they did today. And then you wonder, when they make such star bururin, which gives total elasticity to grabs out whatever psak din they want, it's pshara, and therefore they can do whatever, the heck they want, and they play with people's lives. Now, Rabbi Eidenson, what do you say to what's going on with the what they did?
I never heard of the word Bucky Din. I don't speak that language. But I will say this. Today, it's not safe for a woman to do kedushin. Not safe. I spoke to several agudas. They went through, don't ask what. Don't ask what. The husband tortured from hardship families. But they tortured these women on Ashir. Terrible. And so the mishpachas of the Tzibachana ladies fought back, and they got them organized, and they did fight back, and they left the garbage. But this is what goes on. So I spoke to one of these agunas, and I told her that I'm a great believer in Pilegesh. She said, if I would have known that when I was 19 years old, I would have saved myself a lot of trouble. Her husband is in a different country until he'll give her a get. When people get involved with these marriages and the woman can't leave it, kedushin is Gehenna today, mainly because the Rabbanim don't care. They think the biggest mitzvah is to make a apostle again. Some Rav will just say forced again, which is clearly like the Rambam, like the Poskim, and all the Poskim, the God says all the Poskim are it, and it could be a mamzer or a Suffolk mamzer coming from it, and the Rabbanim like Moshanim and whoop down Mishmul Kamenes. He has a different madrega. He told the woman to remarry without a get. She's married, so and the two of them have been in a bezdin, and the bezdin backed the husband. And I said he doesn't even have to give his wife a get and told the straight out about the husband wanted to see his daughter more, and she stole the daughter out to Philadelphia to be by Shmuel Kamenetsky. So Shmuel Kamenetsky and his son, they're involved in saying lies about this husband that he's not a man. So if he's not a man, then there never was a marriage, and she's free to remarry, and she remarried, and she and her husband now are harsher members of the Philadelphia Yeshiva, and they give money and they get their names in the yearbooks about the wonderful stokas they give for Philadelphia Yeshiva, and then this is Shmuel Kamenetsky and his son that are doing all these things, and of course the Kul Alma. If she has a baby, the kid is a mamzer.
Let me ask you a question, Rabbi Einstein. Let me ask you a question because we will run out of time. I think this is fascinating. We might have to do a second program on this, but let me just ask you, what are the halachic sources, two-part question, b'simtzum, what are the halachic sources that are mater of Pilegesh that would apply to Bizman Hazeh? Who are some of the Gedolim throughout the Doros who held from this, and are there any Rabbanim today who hold from it? And do you know, the third part of the question is, do you know any people who are actually Pilegshim, who are living with a heta from a Rav?
Okay, I'll start with the last question. I do know people of Pilegshim. There's one lady, she's a famous lady. She was married twice with Kedushin, and it was a horror. It's like all these ladies, they get ruined from Kedushin. And the Rav told her, next time no more Kedushin. Next time it's Pilegesh. So she married Pilegesh, and every year she sits down with her husband, and they write up, what do they want to do this year? How much they want to spend? Do they want to buy a new car? Do they want to do this? Do they want to do that? I spoke to her. She says she has lovely children. They're very happy, and she's very happy with her husband. And that Pilegesh, she has no pressure. If I mess around with her, she can walk out anytime. That's what a Pilegesh could do. A Pilegesh could just get up and leave. The husband has no control, no power over her. Kedushin, it's like she belongs to the husband. So then she's ruined.
Do you know any other Pilegesh, and have you spoken?
Yeah, there's a Pilegesh. She's in Israel. She features very often. There's a former site on Facebook. It's made by Terrific Jews, and she speaks there all the time, and she's very active. She's a little bit against lady sometimes, but she's a Pilegesh, and it seems there's a Rav in Eretz Yisrael from a major Bezdin that's very stark, believes very stark in Pilegesh.
So is she the one? Did she say on her website or on her Facebook post, did she speak about the Indian of Pilegesh? Does she advocate that in public or anything like that?
I don't remember, but it was known she's a Pilegesh. I probably saw it from the Facebook there, otherwise how would I have known it? But
now,
I probably learned.
Now, what are the halachic sources? I mean, the Gemara, we don't always paskin like Gemaras. What are the halachic sources throughout the ages that
First of all, there's the Gemara Sanhedrin, Chafal from an Aleph. That's the starkest thing that a Gemara says beferish that Pilegesh is the same as Kedushin, except it's different. So that's the rule. The rule that brings that in the beginning of the Rose Kedushin. According to the Maldomer that talks about Pilegesh is a good thing. Another Maldomer says if she's afraid to go to the mitzvah, then it's a problem. But the Indian of Pilegesh itself is a very Gemara. So that's one thing. The other thing is the Ramban, and the Ramban is brought down. I think it's in Reish Pei Beis. It's Shumas Rashba. There's a chelik of the Rashba known as Miyuchesis that really there are two chuvas there that are signed by the Ramban. And all the other chuvas there are not mentioned by any name, which means they were probably the Rashbas. But there are two chuvas there that chuvas from the Ramban, and one of them talks about Pilegesh. He says over there that Pilegesh, he definitely is Materit, and he says the Rambam is also Materit, and the Rambam in one place talks about that Pilegesh is only for a king. He says that's if it's done deras nus. If it's done deras nus, then it's only mutter for a melech, because if it's deras nus, no one's going to mess around with his nus done by the melech. But otherwise, as far as Pilegesh goes, he says the Rambam is matter.
Now this
so that's the Ramban. So and then you have Rabbi Vemden. So the Rabbi Vemden says that Pilegesh will save a lot of people from Averis, and he brings a ma'aseh that somebody needed a Pilegesh for a certain day to be able to do a certain mitzvah, whatever it was, not the day. But I can point out the Rabbi Vemden is very stark mechazik by Pilegesh when it's done right. And then at the end of his tshuva, he has a very little tshuva about it. At the end of the tshuva, he says two things. One is when you do Pilegesh, you have to check out with the Rav to know exactly all the halachas. And second of all, you have to realize that a child born from Pilegesh can be Yechusem Yisrael. It's a choshev kid. It's not a second class child. So anyway, I just want to add to this that I've spoken to a lot of people about Pilegesh, and I've encouraged it very much. And people have told me, people now know what goes on with Kedusha, and they're afraid of it. And some of them have gone through horrible divorces, and they had enough. And they wouldn't do a Pilegesh because this way, if the marriage doesn't work out, you just get up and say goodbye. There's no scandals. There's no going to Bezdins that charge huge amounts of money and torture people, and like you say, all the garbage that goes on. So people wouldn't get out of that system.
When you quote the Gra, so the Gra in the Shulchan Aruch was a glass that's basically halachic. So does that mean, can we extrapolate, can we understand that the Gra is holds from Pilegesh? That he holds from it?
If a person gets up, the Gra or anybody else, points to a Ferish Gemara that Pilegesh is mutter, how can anybody disagree?
So why is it that it's, many of your colleagues are so irritated and people in Rabbanim are so anti?
Okay. The same reason that I'm afraid of it. For instance, there's one of the chuvas that's not the certain things with Pilegesh. Pilegesh is much different than Kedusha. And he says a certain kula. I personally, I would like to deal with Pilegesh, but I would never suggest anybody do that kula. Because if I would suggest it, it could destroy my whole efforts to spread Pilegesh. I can only succeed in getting people to do Pilegesh if I don't present Pilegesh as something that turns everything upside down. How to get married.
Rabbi Eidens, we have 2 minutes remaining to say whatever you'd like to say.
Well, beloved, it's a very big pleasure for me, an old man, to sit with you.
But no. Listen.
People that believe that.
All right, listen.
That the Torah came from Sinai, not from the Balak.
I want you. If people are interested in speaking to you anonymously, or how can they contact you if they're interested in either they have questions that be curious, or they themselves want to be involved in this possible in such a relationship? How would they get in touch with you?
Okay, my phone number is 845-578-1917. That's 845-578-1917. And my email is EIDENSOHND as in David @gmail.com. That's EIDENSOHND as in David @gmail.com.
Okay, and
I'm very happy to talk to anybody.
All right, in our concluding moments, it's possible that we will have Rabbi Eidenson on for round 2. We have an open challenge and request for whoever wants to indicate why there are not problems with the Batei Din, why everything is legitimate and the staggering thing, or anybody who wants to argue on the suggestion of Pilegesh as a way of dealing with things. And by the way, Rav Bakshi Doron already a long time ago said that we should stop doing Kedushin marriages for Fraya people because it just leads to Mamzeris and Znus and bad Gittin and everything else. And maybe it's Niskatnu Adoiris. So there is a sort of support for this idea. And if the Rabbanim would do something, maybe we wouldn't have to say something as radical as Pilegesh. Until we meet again next time, this is your harbinger of Hashkafa, dean and founder of the University of Das Torah Mezikne Yisrael from Dosha Ova, your humble servant Yehuda Levin, a guten Tamid.